Welcome back, guys. I hope you are all doing well. So, today's my topic of discussion is about the ventricles of the brain, which is the cavities inside the brain which contains the cerebrospinal fluid. This fluid is very important. Its contents is a lot of nutrients which supply to all around the brain and also the spinal cord. So, first I draw the structure and show you the ventricles of the brain. So there are two lateral ventricles of the brain which is present in the two hemispheres of the brain, okay, right hemisphere and left hemisphere. So I draw the anterior view of the brain, okay, and I only draw the ventricles of the brain in the anterior view. So here is two lateral ventricles of the brain which is present in the hemispheres of the brain, right cerebral hemisphere and left cerebral hemisphere. This is right side and this is left side, okay. So there are two lateral ventricles. So inferior to the lateral ventricle there is another ventricle, is third ventricle, okay. Inferior to the lateral ventricle there is third ventricle, and also inferior to the third ventricle there is another ventricle which is fourth ventricle, okay. So how many ventricles of the brain? There are four ventricles of the brain: two lateral ventricle, one third ventricle, and one fourth ventricle. So there is a connection between these ventricles. I tell you the name, the how it connects with each other. Okay. So the connection of the lateral ventricle to the third ventricle must remember the name of the connection between the ventricles, okay. Okay, so the name of the connection between the ventricles, the lateral ventricle connect with the third ventricle with the help of this duct. What is the name of this duct? Either from the right side, either from the left side. What are the name of this duct? This is interventricular duct, okay. The another name of this duct is foramen Munro, okay, foramen Munro, okay. It's just a connection between the lateral ventricle and the third ventricle. Later on I explain the location of these ventricles, all these ventricles, okay. So first is, what are the name of this duct? Interventricular duct. I write number one. Number one is interventricular duct, right side and left side. Second one is this, number two, which connects the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. What are the name of this duct? This duct is like 1 minute. So what are the name of this duct? This is cerebral aqueduct, okay. What are the name of the second duct? This is cerebral aqueduct which connects the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. And now from the fourth ventricle there are three openings, okay. Two lateral openings, okay, and one inferior opening, okay. What are the connection of these openings which comes from the fourth ventricle? This opening and this opening enters into the subarachnoid space of the brain, okay, where cerebrospinal fluid float all around the brain. The meninges of the brain, there is subarachnoid space, okay, just inner to the arachnoid matter, there is subarachnoid space. So this and this connection, these two connections, lateral two connections, goes to connect with the subarachnoid space of the brain. And the third one, which is inferior, this one, it goes in the central canal of the spinal cord, okay, for the cerebrospinal fluid. All these pathways helps for the transport of the CSF, okay, cerebrospinal fluid. In next video I explain the what are the composition of CSF, what are the nutrients present in the CSF, what are the specific gravity of fluid, like this, more explanation about CSF. So these are the structures in which the CSF travels, okay. So now I tell you how the CSF is developed, okay, the formation of the CSF. Guys, in the lateral ventricle there is a plexus. What are the name of these plexus? Is choroid plexus. What are the name of it? In the lateral ventricles, in the third ventricle also, in the fourth ventricle also, there is a plexus called choroid plexus, okay, which made up of ependymal cells, okay. Ependymal cells contains the cilia, and the function of the choroid plexus and ependymal cell is to secrete the CSF fluid, okay. What are the function of CSF fluid? It act as a barrier of the brain, okay. Also it provides the nutrients to the meninges of the brain, okay. It provides nutrients to the meninges of the brain, which are pia mater, arachnoid matter and dura mater, okay, all these. So these are all the structure related to ventricles of the brain. How many ventricles? Four. Two lateral ventricles, one third and one fourth ventricle. Now I explain you the location of these ventricles. So this is the anterior view of the brain. So right hemisphere and the left hemisphere contains lateral ventricle, okay. Deep in the hemisphere of the brain there is a lateral ventricles are present. Next, the third ventricle, the location of the third ventricle between the thalamus, okay. We have a structure called the thalamus, which is the part of the deep in the cerebral hemispheres, which is diencephalon, okay. The thalamus is the part of the diencephalon. So here is thalamus, okay, right thalamus and left thalamus, and between the thalamus there is a cavity, empty space, which contain the cerebrospinal fluid called the third ventricle, okay. And the last one, the fourth ventricle, the location of the fourth ventricle, some says the location of the fourth ventricle is the in the brainstem, okay. So this is actually present in the brainstem, but what the exact location of the fourth ventricle? In between the pons, okay, pons and cerebellum, okay. In between the pons and cerebellum there are four ventricle are present, okay. So next to the fourth ventricle there is the opening of the fourth ventricle, three opening, okay. One is the medial opening, which is most inferior, which continue to the central canal of the spinal cord for the CSF fluid. And there is two lateral opening which goes to around the around your brain, around your meninges of the brain in the subarachnoid space, okay. So it means subarachnoid space contains which fluid? Cerebrospinal fluid, okay guys. So these are the structure related to it. So now I tell you the name of these structures, name of the connections. Though the first connection is foramen munro, okay, first one. Second connection is cerebral aqueduct. Now the connection which continue to the subarachnoid space of the brain, this one, this is the third one, have two connection, third one right side and third one left side. Okay, what are the name of these two connections? These two connection is foramen luschka. Okay, lateral means it present at the lateral side of the fourth ventricle. So luschka, L, start from L, lateral luschka, foramen luschka. And there is one medial which goes to the central canal of the spinal cord, which is, now this is the fourth one. I have to write in black. The fourth one. What are the name of this structure? This is present medial to the luschka, foramen luschka. So what are the name of this? Foramen magendi. Okay, what are the name of this? Foramen magendi. So guys, these are all the structures. What are the location of the ventricles of the brain? How the ventricle of brain, what are the functions of the it? Okay, what are the connection between the ventricles of the brain? So guys, this is all about the ventricles of the brain. In next video I explain the composition of CSF which is present in the ventricles of the brain, and functions, and the gravity of the specific gravity and related diseases of it. So now guys, I explain you the clinical importance of these system. Clinical guys, not go with my writing. Okay, my writing is very beautiful, but now on the screen I cannot write properly, so I have to label the diagram and explain to you. Okay, so what are the importance of the clinical of the ventricles of the brain? So if there is any blockage in the ducts of the brain, either in the interventricular duct, okay, number one, number two, either in the cerebral aqueduct, okay, there is any blockage inside, what happen, the CSF which is accumulate inside the ventricles of the brain. Okay, there is a lot of CSF production and lot of the CSF accumulate. It means a lot of fluid accumulation in the ventricles of the brain. When there is a lot of fluid accumulation in the ventricle of the brain, what are the clinical disease related to it? The condition called hydrocephalus. Okay, the condition called hydrocephalus, which is the which is present in the babies, because the baby's brain is not too much developed, so it takes time, the ossification of the bones also. When there is the blockage in the ventricles of the brain of the baby, there is a lot of production of CSF, and there is a lot of fluid accumulate in the CSF, and the head of the baby is large. Okay, when the baby is born and the head of the baby is large than the normal, the head circumference is larger than the normal, so there may be a chance of the presence of hydrocephalus of the baby. Okay, there is any duct of the ventricles of the brain is blockage. Okay, so the examination tells you either the problem is blockage or any other reason, the head of the baby is large. So what are the clinical condition? Hydrocephalus. Okay guys, other more conditions related to hydrocephalus also in the osteopetrosis is a condition in which there is a clinical finding hydrocephalus also in osteopetrosis. Okay, and there is also the hydrocephalus also. So guys, this is all about the ventricles of the brain, and please guys, watch the complete video, like, share and subscribe, and press the bell icon to receive any new video. Okay guys, so be happy, take care.